What are the darkest extents of Wolverine's mutation, and how are they continually being held back? Contrary to popular belief, Logan's mutation doesn't simply consist of a healing factor and the bone claws embedded in his forearms, as there is much more going on behind the scenes. Recently, we released a video about some of the more subtle powers offered by Wolverine's mutation that don't always get the spotlight, but that video mainly focused on the large benefits of Wolverine's mutation. Today, we wanted to talk about its major drawbacks, and how he is actually being restrained from the darkest aspects of his physiology. So today, let's talk about feral Wolverine and the true extent of Wolverine's mutation and power. Throughout the course of a mutant's lifetime, their mutation has the potential to grow stronger and stronger, with this typically associated with their age. Part of this depends on how well the mutant in question learns how to channel this mutation, and how they themselves grow with time, but some mutations naturally evolve over time with no input or control from the host. This is perhaps the most prevalent with someone like Beast. Hank McCoy's mutation started off slow. He wasn't always the furry blue creature that we see in the comics, and a lot of his depictions, his first mutation actually is just a step above a regular human. Slowly, however, Hank began to mutate even further into the beast that we know and love, and Logan has a mutation similar to this just waiting in the wings. As Logan grew, he began to become more and more feral with heightened animal instincts and senses. This is a key part of his mutation that is overlooked. This is where he gets his uncanny ability to track his prey through these senses, and where he gets the ability to empathetically communicate with animals. Although he can't have direct conversations with animals, he is able to convey and understand emotion and intention between himself and them, and he developed these powers as his mutation became stronger. There was this Berserker rage ability within Wolverine inherently, because when he becomes angry enough, his savage instincts begin to take over. Wolverine's rage is not just a state of him being incredibly mad, but his grasp on reality actually begins to slip away in favor of something far more primal. This is something that Wolverine has to hold at bay all the time because of his mutation. But what if we were to tell you that this aspect of his mutation actually went much further in the comics? If Logan's mutation is allowed to run free and unchecked and fully develop to the fullest extent of its capabilities, then it will begin to erode Logan's human mind and replace it with something more animalistic and bestial. Logan's consciousness will slowly fade away as his grip on reality wanes and wanes with each passing day. Wolverine becomes more trapped in a sort of state of perpetual berserker rage and animal instinct. This then brings up the question, which is, how is Wolverine's mutation being suppressed, and why isn't it allowed to run wild all the time? The simple answer is actually because of his adamantium skeleton, which was grafted to the exterior lining of Logan's bones during the Weapon X program procedure. We know that Wolverine's adamantium coating is notoriously unhealthy for his body and is actually hindering him in a number of ways. But again, if you would like to see a full breakdown of this and all of the pitfalls of the adamantium skeleton, be sure to check out our bone claw video as well. But the basic premise is that the worst downside is that the skeleton is actually poisoning Logan. Adamantium is simply not meant to exist inside a human body, let alone is it meant to exist in such large quantities across all of Logan's skeletal structure. Nobody should be able to survive with this much adamantium, even Wolverine with his incredible healing factor, and he is struggling to maintain it. After getting the adamantium infusion, Logan's healing factor was put on overdrive in order to constantly fend off the adamantium poisoning, so it became far less effective as the years went on in the comics. Logan's aging actually crept toward a rate that was more in line with a normal person rather than his incredibly slow aging process, which is his normal mutation. And though it was still slower than an average person, Logan was worse off than what he was theoretically capable of doing. All of this is to say that the adamantium skeleton requires so much maintenance from Logan's mutation that it's actively hindering it in other facets. A lot of the times we look at this as a drawback. However, this also limits his bestial rage, and lucky for us, we've been able to see exactly what Logan looks like when his adamantium skeleton is removed, and we see the true extent of Wolverine's true mutation. When Magneto ripped the adamantium out of Logan's body in the Fatal Attractions crossover event, his mutation was no longer left partially dormant, and this feral rage came surging back in full force. This gave way to the infamous feral Wolverine story, which may be regarded in the years since as something of a train wreck. It's something of an interesting concept to talk about though. At first, Wolverine simply became more aggressive, but as an already aggressive character, this didn't manifest much than some of his other misadventures. But once Wolverine executed Sabretooth in cold blood, the rest of the X-Men began to suspect that something was wrong with him. But this is just the beginning of the story. By this point, the son of Cable from the future had begun to serve Apocalypse and was actively in search of new horsemen, and naturally, Wolverine was a perfect candidate. In order to prepare Wolverine, Cable's son attempted to rebond the adamantium to his skeleton, and he would subsequently brainwash Logan into becoming a servant of Apocalypse. But unfortunately for everyone involved, the procedure was a colossal failure. Not only did Logan's body completely reject the adamantium the second time around, but it sent the rest of his mutation into overdrive as a response. Now, he was no longer held back, and Logan's healing factor was working better than ever. He returned to the bone claws, and more importantly, Logan's mind slipped away. The feral side completely corroded Logan, with only a few basic words and phrases being spoken for the most of the remainder of the comic run. Logan escaped into the woods like an animal that he was, and became nearly unrecognizable. After a string of missions where the X-Men tried to coexist with a feral Wolverine, they were eventually able to pull Elektra into the fold, and she found a way to more acutely communicate with Logan. It took a lot of work, but Elektra was eventually able to piece his mind back together in order to communicate with him. This didn't, however, change his appearance, as he was still Wolverine, just trapped in this mutated brute of a body. For a time, Logan seemed to find a way to exist with the X-Men in his new form, as he put on a new blue bandana and did his best to resume his old hero work since his old suit and cowl no longer fit him. His return to his normal appearance, however, is a bit more convoluted, with a few explanations being retconned and stacked on top of one another over the years. When Anthony Wynn came to illustrate issues 107, 8, and 9, Wolverine looked like he had returned back to his normal self and design, but unfortunately there was little to no explanation given as to exactly why this was. But it was later explained that he had began using an image inducer to cover up his feral appearance. In issue 110, however, he was back to his feral form, seemingly having done away with the image inducer. But then he's back to normal again immediately following this, leaving us devoid of a proper explanation for how Logan actually returned to his old appearance. The entire saga, however, is poorly remembered overall by fans and critics alike, as one of Wolverine's weaker storylines and a story arc that is not discussed by fans very often at all. Many of the characters in the comics conveniently forget this ever happened, and it doesn't seem to be a major concern for anyone past this point. Fans alike seem like they've been happy to leave this story in the past, though this doesn't mean that this concept at its core is entirely terrible, just that it wasn't brought out in the most effective way. Given the reception of this saga, it's unlikely that we'll ever see Wolverine's feral side completely devolve in the same form again. But that doesn't mean that Wolverine's mutation doesn't give him more bestial properties. This blueprint has always been there from the beginning, and even though the story took it to an absolute extreme, we believe there is a reasonable middle ground to continue exploring this part of the story, but perhaps with better execution. But anyway, friends, what do you think of the feral Wolverine saga? And would you be down if they recreated this in the comics, or maybe even on screen one day? What are your thoughts on the aspects of Logan's mutation that are not widely discussed among fans, and the fact that he is actually partially animalistic naturally because of his mutation? As always, my friends, thank you so much for stopping by the channel today, and if you love Marvel and superheroes, smash that subscribe button for more, and have a great one.